Hello everyone, it's Kevin here again, and this week we're going to be going over some object models. And in this lecture we'll also be going over some group work stuff, so just stay tuned for that. So to start off, we're going to want to open up Visual Studio 2022. We're going to want to create a new project here. Select ASP.NET Core Web API, and name this whatever you'd like to name it. I am going to name mine Week 4. Or actually, instead of this, I'll name mine Models Lecture. Select .NET 6.0 or just the preview, whichever version, just not 3.1 or any other version. It's got to be 6 point something. Leave all these selections default. Let the project create. We're going to go to our controllers, open up our weather forecasting controller. We're going to rename this to Models Example. When you click OK on that, that sets all the references, changes all the references, so you don't run into any build errors. So I'm going to get rid of all these here items that we don't need. And I'm just going to leave this as is, return null, just so there's no errors. So to start off, what are models? So models are, just like in the real world, they're representations of something bigger, something else. So a model airplane, model aircraft is a representation, a smaller representation that you can typically hold within your hand, or that you can fly, an RC type of a big aircraft. And you can use these models to create a bigger aircraft. Probably not the best example, but it's just what came to mind right away. So we need these models so that we can take in some input and have some standardized input, because if we just take any input, we're going to be throwing exceptions all the time. This is common with non-typed languages or non-typed frameworks like Node.js. So creating an API with Node.js can lead to exceptions if you pass in the wrong stuff. So that's why we need to use some models here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what a normal model looks like, typical model, and it's just like this here. It's a public class. So public class, let's see here, coin. And coins, for example. So in this example, just so that you know what I'm trying to reference, is coins in the sense of cryptocurrencies. So you can have like Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has a price. It has a ticker. It's got a supply. Just some examples. So public string name, and have our getters and setters set right there. Public string value. Pretty good default selection right there. Public string, and actually the value would not be a string, the value would be a double. So let's have that be a double. Public, what else are we going to want in here? Public double supply. Take care of the getters and setters there, and public string ticker. So here's our coin model. So here's some of the properties that are associated with the coin model. Get used to seeing this. This is used extensively just about everywhere when you're working with an API, at least if it's a type-safe programming language like Java or C# or C++. Just keep that in mind. So what we're going to be doing here is, if you could tell here, you're actually already using an object model. The standard return here is a weather forecast object. So this is what would be returned in this specific route. But I'm going to change this. So we want this to be an HTTP post. If you remember, the HTTP post, well, not the HTTP post, but just the post route when it comes to REST. Post routes send data over a request body and not through query string parameters. So we're going to change this to coins, or no, change this to models example. And instead of returning an I enumerable, which is just it's similar to a list where it's got a couple functions that are included with it where you can run through it. I'll just return a list instead. I'd rather work with a list. Actually change this to a post as well. So we're going to want to return an action result of type list of type coin. And our input is going to be a list of type coin. Pretty simple. And right away we're going to return this list of type coin. We're not going to do anything with it, we're just going to return it. I should probably define this list. So coins, return our coins. And right away we're going to run an error. We're going to run into an error when I try to run this. So let's go ahead and let this start up. Go to our postman. I'll pull up this here call. I'll send the request. There we go. Send this a post. We're going to pass into it some JSON, JavaScript object notation. So I should probably go over this as well. JSON, the reason we use JSON is because it's just a structured way of sending a string over the internet, over the net, whatever you want to call it. And it can handle, it doesn't matter what the size of the object is. It's pretty efficient to send these large objects over. So that's why we're using JSON, and it's industry standard at this point. So to send an object, we're going to open up one of these here curly brackets, braces, whatever you want to call them. So this is a list, I should say, an array, a list. And inside of this list, it has a couple elements. So here's the first element. Here's the second element. And if we remember, what do we have to send? What do we have to send into this here? We have to send in an object of type coin. So if I go back here, look at this right here. Here's our properties: our name, value, supply, and ticker. So go back to here. Name is Bitcoin. Add a comma after that. Our ticker is BTC. Our supply is, say, I have no idea, just off the top of my head, 29 billion. 6, 7, 8, 9. There we go. And our price, I believe that's what I have that set as. Our value, not price. Our value is approximately 36,000. And since they're doubles, I'm just going to make sure to give it a couple zeros at the end, some trailing zeros. I'm going to copy this, paste it over here for another object. This one's going to be Litecoin, LTC, supply of, I have no idea. This one is one that I really don't know, so say 99 million. Value of $59. Try to send this over, and we should run into an issue. If we don't run into an issue, I'll be surprised. Yeah, we didn't run into an issue. Typically, when you send body input over to one of these here, over to one of these API routes, you have to specify that it's from the body. So if we do here from body, try to run this again. It's typically what you do with .NET Core APIs. Try sending that request again. Yeah, it handled it just fine. That is atypical. In my testing, basically what would happen is .NET would get confused. It would get confused. It wouldn't know what to use. So sometimes I had Newtonsoft, which is just a package that handles serialization and deserialization of objects, which is what we're doing here. We're deserializing this this here string. And we're deserializing it from JSON, a JSON string, into an object of type list of type coin. So it would get confused, and it would give it some other stuff here. So if we break through this here code, just console, or actually for each, do a for each of var, no, come on, var coin in coins, and just system dot const, well, dot, trying to remember what the diagnostics, yep, dot debug dot writeline, there it was right there, there we go, debug dot writeline coin dot name. So if we break through this here, try running this again, we're gonna hit our breakpoint. Our coin.name is Bitcoin. We'll look at our object, and yeah, it just took it in as a object of type coins. What would sometimes happen though is it wouldn't be able to parse this here response, or not the response, the request I should say. It wouldn't be able to parse that request. So what I had to do, and if this happens to you, all you got to do is you have to go here, go to manage NuGet packages. I gotta stop this here API. Go to browse and then look up Microsoft.ASP.core.MVC.Newtonsoft. Just that should be enough right there. Microsoft.ASP.NetCore.MVC.Newtonsoft JSON, and then just install this. And then you got to add to your program.cs a, I got it right here, it's a services, it's a function for services. So you just got to add the Newtonsoft JSON controller so that it knows to reference that one. And that seemed to solve my issues. So once again, it's quite surprising that it didn't cause any issues here. So we go back to our models example. That's really, that's the basics of the models. There really isn't too much more to it, but this is, at the end of the day, this is what object-oriented programming is. I mean, we inherit from object or from classes, we implement classes, we create classes, we instantiate classes, or objects might be a better name for them. And this is what we want to do. It saves you a huge headache, and instead of having a long program that's 1,000 lines long, we can save time and headaches, and even more time when you're debugging when you go the object-oriented route by doing this here. And it also ensures type safety, which it basically, type safety, if I haven't gone over this yet, type safety is where when you have something that's coming in that's going to be deserialized. Just an example of type safety is, say we want to take this coin, but for some reason we're passing in a double value into the name parameter. What would happen there is if we didn't have typing, so if we were working with like node.js, which doesn't have typing, unless of course you use TypeScript, but that's beyond the scope of this lecture. I will go over it a little bit. Basically just TypeScript is, as it sounds, it's JavaScript with typing. But here in this example, if we were to send a decimal or a double into the name parameter, we would run into an issue. It would cause the application to throw an exception. And that's good because we can handle exceptions and we can let the user know. We can send, instead of returning just coins, we could send, see here, we could just take this here coin. So we could try to loop through this coin. Just going to do a console.log or console.writeline coin.name. So if we do this here and this throws any error, we can just catch that error. Return bad request. And the exception, well, we can't return the exception message because it's not a list, so we can just return null. And if we have a logging function, say we have a function down here or in anywhere else where it's just log. This is one that I was working with today actually at work. This here coin might have a function public void log error. Takes in a string error, and we have an extra parenthesis there. And in my example, it just went to the data access layer of the application of the API at work, and it called a function from that data access layer. So it would have been just a log error asynchronously or whatever, and it logged the error. So here it would have been like a log error async, and then our error. And we don't do anything with this here, so we're just gonna console.write line. I'm thinking too much of JavaScript. So this is our logging function. In here, before we return our bad request, we can just make sure to log or instantiate a new coin object. So coin is equal to new coin, no parameters for that. And we can run our coin.logError, pass in our exception message. And the beauty of this is you don't have to have this object declared here. We could instead do this. Get rid of all this here stuff. We could add to this here. See here, add a new item. Just add a class here in this example. We're going to rename this here class coin.cs. Pass in everything that we did earlier. And we can use it back in our controller. Of course, we need to return something here, so we're going to return OK. And our coin object, or coins, list of type coin. Okay, what's going on here? Alright, we'll just leave this be for now, but yeah, I just wanted to go over some of these items so we could log our error. And something else that I should mention, get used to using try catches. So with most real-world APIs, you're going to want to handle all of your errors, every single error. You don't want your application, your API, to crash. So just handle your exceptions like this here. You know what, I'm just going to rectify this before ending. So maybe it didn't like that. List of type coin. Just so that this doesn't say anything to us. There we go. And we're going to return, set our bad request, our B coins. Okay. I'm going to pause the video. I don't want to give you guys any false information here. So, pause it. Too simple. Shouldn't have got me. It's just forgot to enter return there. It was that simple. So, yeah, this is as simple as it gets for objects and for models. Like I said, if you run into any issues with deserialization of this, then go ahead and install the Newtonsoft, and it's got to be the older version. It's got to be this this here package, because Newtonsoft Newtonsoft does offer some other packages here. So newtonsoft.json, this does not work. I tried it and I couldn't get it to work, so that other one is the one that you got to use. The one that you should use if you want to avoid the headaches that I went through. So I'm going to go back here. I explained deserialization a little bit, what we do with deserialization, but I'm going to show an actual example of deserialization. So I'm going to, well, this is for later. If we go here, go to my GitHub, go to my repositories. Let's see here. Tree of Crypto should be the right one. Yep, this should be it. Or function.cs. Yeah, this one is not it. Although I do pull in some serialization stuff. That's not the one that we need. We need insert crypto. So right here, what I'm doing is I'm just taking an input. So if you look through this, it's just like what we're doing in using .NET Core. Instead here, it's just it's Amazon. It's working with Amazon. When I used this last time, they ended up charging just for having an account that didn't have anything else. So that's why I decided to go with .NET Core. It's free. It teaches you the same stuff, and it is used in industry as well. So what I did here is I just pulled an object from this here API. It's a coin cap API. It returns a whole bunch of coins. So I'm going to go over this here quickly. Go in Postman. Should still be active. So it returns this here data right here, our ID, rank, symbol, name. So if you're wondering where I got the idea of using crypto, this is where I got it from. It's this is something that you might use in an actual application that you're working with. If you get to work with cryptocurrencies, something you might be working with. So I chose to do that. I also thought about stock market information, but it's, why not do crypto? It's a little bit more modern. So if we look back here, it wasn't quite as simple as just reading this input as an object. Although there may be a way to do it, there may be a more simple way. A very common way in industry to do this is to create an expando object and take that expando object and then take a converter, which you're going to use them together, the expando object and the converter. So here's our expando object declaration, and then here's our converter. So what we do here is we deserialize into an expando object the result. If we look here, the result here, this result is just the string response. So this is our JSON. This is what we got back. But we want to take that JSON and we want to use it as an object. But the JSON isn't an object in C#. The JSON is just a string. According to C#, this is just a string. And you can't access properties of a string JSON object without doing any sort of serialization or deserialization. So what this basically does is it takes that string and it converts it into this object. Now, this is what when we go ahead and we go back to our models example, when we take this as a list of type coins, this is handling the deserialization right here. This is handling it all automatically. This is one of the nice things of .NET Core. It handles the deserialization for us. .NET Framework also handles this as well. So if I go back to my example, we take this, and I did end up inserting into a database. In this example, I ended up inserting into a database, but just ignoring this, I had to take some JSON. I had to create some JSON, and this is where the serialization comes into play. So we have our object right here. So this expando object, and what an expando object looks like is just like this. It's system.dynamic, I believe. It's around here. Yep, system.dynamic. And we're going to be using those later on in the course when we do this exact stuff, when we start reading from APIs, from other APIs, because they're going to be returning strings. They're not going to be returning objects, perfectly formatted objects. So in this example, I took this here Expando object and I converted it to JSON. And then once I converted it to JSON, I could then take that JSON and convert it into an object of type coin. So this is where it would be used. This is where the deserialization and the serialization would be used. I just thought I'd show one of these examples just to clear up any sort of maybe misunderstanding, or it's good to be exposed to this early on in the course. So now that we've got that out of the way, this should be it, just the model, and our API should be pretty similar to what the assignment's going to be this week. And you will be working on a group assignment, so you're gonna have to be creating models and doing stuff with that. And that leads me right into the group assignment. So if I go back to my browser, we're going to have groups in this semester. We're going to have a couple groups, 4 groups, I believe. And the reason that I had groups, it's you're going to be working in a team environment more than likely when it comes to the real world. Of course, there's going to be a few of you that are just not going to end up programming at all. There's going to be another couple of individuals that are going to end up working alone on projects. But of the vast majority of you, I'd be willing to bet that you're going to end up working in a team environment. You're going to be working with a couple other individuals, a couple other developers. So the reason that I chose to really focus on groups this semester is just to get that, get some structure in your mind already of what teamwork will be like in the real world. So these are some items that end up being necessary when you're working on the job. So just for this assignment, for example, I am going to need the group to create a video and explain how your group plans to be successful. So here's some of the items that got to be covered. What's the group's general plan for success? So what I would like to see there is, how do you plan to be successful? What are you going to do? Are you going to get started on assignments early? Now, I'm not going to give all the answers for these, because then, of course, you're just going to use that in your group video. So just make it straightforward. Make sure you don't have to have any filler. As long as you get the content necessary in there, as long as you address all these items, there is no minimum video length requirement or anything like that. Just cover these items in depth, and you'll meet all the expectations. So next, how does the group plan to communicate effectively? So what I want to see here, this is something that I will outline, I would like to see what method of communication you're going to use. So are you going to use Discord? That's what I would suggest. Discord's a really good tool, and most of you already have Discord accounts, as most of you, or if not all of you, are already on the class Discord. So how does the group plan to communicate effectively? You're going to use Discord, or you're going to use SMS messages, Snapchat, Messenger, Signal Messenger. You're going to send Morse code over 7 megahertz, use 2-meter band on radio to communicate with each other. Whatever you choose to use, just make sure you explain what you're going to be using, and just go over that. How are you going to make it be effective? Next, how does the group plan to get started in assignments early? So it could be as simple as just catching up with all the group members on the Monday or on the Tuesday, and just coming up with a game plan. That's just one example, but just make sure to go over how you plan to get started on assignments early, because I'll tell you right now that there's going to be some assignments that will likely take 10 to 15 hours total to complete for some individuals, and they might take 1 or 2 hours for other individuals to take care of. So it's just something to keep in mind. Just get started on it early, work an hour or 2 a day, or just get it all done on the first day or the second day. But just make sure that you have a plan to get started on assignments early. Make sure to really focus on this one. And finally, how will instances of lack of effort from a group member be addressed? We all know, we've all been in groups. I attended the same college program that you all are attending right now, and really I didn't have to deal with it much, just because this is pretty similar to what Joe's doing, and I'm going to have the peer reviews similar to the ones that Joe has for his classes. But it's something that I'm sure we all have dealt with in the past. where a group member doesn't put in their, all their work. So you end up with 1 or 2 or 3 group members getting most of the assignment done, and then 2 or 3 other group members just slack off and don't do anything. How will this be addressed? Just get creative. What do you plan to do? Are you going to email them? Are you going to plan a conversation over Zoom, over Discord? You can get me involved. You can do whatever you have to do, but just make sure that you go over how it's going to be addressed. I don't want to hear, we're just going to tell them to get to work. Just go into detail. I want to hear what you're going to do, and because if you think about it, what would you do if perhaps you thought that you were doing all the work necessary, but all your group members didn't see it that way? That's going to be a case as well. So how would you like to be addressed? A meeting is how I would like to be addressed personally. So that's just something that should be covered here in the video. Also, I would like to see what roles each group member will have. So I'd like to see like a leader role, submitter role, a reserve role, like a reserve group member role, where if one of the group members ends up dropping out of the class, or one of the group members has some sort of emergency or anything like that, who's going to be able to fill in? So that's just another example. Source control is another good role to have. Who's going to handle the GitHub? Because that's what we're going to be using for source control, GitHub. And make sure to name this document. I'd like to see this outlined in the video, and also I'd like to see a document written up for each group member, and name it as follows here. Just the normal naming conventions apply as usual. And finally, you can do it really in any order, but I would like to see this and really focus on this especially. Cover what object models are, demonstrate an example in code, and explain some legitimate uses for object models. I'm not teaching you all what an object model is and how to use it just so that you can go and create hello world programs and go on for eaches, create for each loop structures, and loop through the same list over and over again saying hello world. That's not what this course is preparing you for. This course is preparing you to be an API developer. So where is this going to be used? Just some examples that I can think off the top of my head. Credit card transaction. So any credit card transaction where a credit card has a credit card number, a credit card has a security code. I should mention right now that these items would likely be encrypted if they get sent over. If you're ever, just remember this, if you're ever working somewhere and you're keeping these items as plain text, just be very wary of that company and be very wary of doing business with a company like that stores stuff in plain text. So that's one example, like a credit card transaction. Who is going to be receiving and who's sending out, some basic information about the card holder. That's just one example. So you might have a transaction object, transaction model, and that transaction model has a couple properties like the ones that I explained. Another one would be like that coin model. Another one would be a customer model. Customers have first names, last names. They typically have a primary key customer ID or some sort of ID to identify these customers, and make sure to maintain just to ensure data integrity. And those are just a couple examples that I can think right off the top of my head. But just also don't use those examples now that I went over them. It was just to get the ball rolling. But explain some legitimate uses for object models and demonstrate them in code. So I would like to see this. I would like to see somebody sharing their screen. I would like to see an object on their screen and them explaining what this object is so the properties of the object. Also, them going over an API route where they loop through this object and they deserialize this object coming in from just a string input. Make sure to use from body there. And I gotta make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. Record the video using any method you'd like. So Kaltura is a pretty good option. You could use YouTube. You could use Zoom. Zoom is actually pretty good. I had a group last semester. It was 1 or 2 groups that would use Zoom. And Zoom has a pretty neat feature where you can make it look like you're in a conference room. Pretty neat to me, I thought, and it definitely improved the professionality of that group. So just one item to keep in mind. Submit the video. I might add some other stuff here, some naming conventions for the video, but I mean really just submit it. Just send in the URL. I don't think there's any naming conventions that could actually apply to that. Also, ensure that you only have one submission per group. This would typically be your submitter or your leader, whoever you choose to have submit these assignments, and that would be covered in your roles of each group member document. So last semester, I ended up I just created the groups right off the top of my head, and I created a document, or I actually took a screenshot of a notes document where it was the name of the group, and then it was the group members in the group. So this semester I actually ended up using some of the D12 functionality where you can automatically generate groups. So I used that. So that should prevent this issue from coming up. But once again, I only expect to have one submission per group. If you have to make a correction, make sure to explain in text what the correction is for, why you're making the correction, and also remember that I typically will not take any late work, especially from a group. If we think about it, we have an entire week to take care of this, and that's where our getting started on assignments early comes into play. So if you have any questions, as always, just send me a Discord message. Other than that, thank you for watching, and you all take care.